Content warning. This episode contains discussion of child sexual abuse materials and murder.
So recently, there have been some pretty important developments in Kegan Kline's case. This is, of course, the case against a 29-year-old man from Peru, Indiana, who first came on the radar of the Delphi investigation in 2017. He's since been charged with initially 30, narrowed down to 25 counts regarding child sexual abuse materials. And for a while, he was very much a prominent figure in sort of the Delphi investigation. Richard Allen's arrest in October 2023 has sort of thrown his role into this case into question. But basically what happened very recently was that Kegan Kline's sentencing hearing took place, or rather, did not take place.
Kegan Kline had pled guilty to all of those counts.
Yeah, all of those counts, 25 counts. But instead of having a sentencing hearing, we actually had another continuance and maybe some indications that Kegan Kline could actually walk back his guilty plea. And we sort of covered all of that initially in our one-off episode, but we sort of wanted to take a time to step back, really look at some of the overall themes here, look at some of what could happen next, what's happened so far, why does all this matter? And basically get that to you now that we've had a chance to step back and maybe process some of this. My name is Anya Kane. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
We first connected while looking into the Burger Chef murders, an Indiana cold case. Together, we built a spreadsheet documenting hundreds of cases of restaurant-related homicides. That original spreadsheet gave way to our podcast, The Murder Sheet.
Now we maintain that same research-centric, investigative approach as we look into all sorts of homicides, including unsolved cases, historical crimes, and, of course, restaurant murders.
We don't just chat about the headlines. Our podcast is a platform for our journalism. The Murder Sheet focuses on investigative reporting, thoughtful analysis, thorough research, and in-depth interviews.
We're the Murder Sheet.
And this is the Delphi murders, the fallout from Kegan Kline's sentencing hearing that wasn't.
So I guess the first thing to note about this particular subject is that there's been a bit of news since the hearing last Thursday. Namely, last Friday, Andrew Achey, who has been Kegan Kline's defense attorney, filed a letter and a motion with the court. And I will read both now. Dear Kegan, along with this letter, I've enclosed a copy of the motion to withdraw my appearance. In the next few days, the judge will issue an order granting my motion to withdraw, and I will send you a copy of the order granting my motion to withdraw, which will confirm that my appearance for you has been withdrawn. Please note that there is a status conference scheduled in your matter on June 1st, 2023 at 11 a.m., and a sentencing hearing on July 27th, 2023 at 9 a.m. in which you are required to attend. It was my pleasure representing you in the above-mentioned matter, and I truly wish you the best of luck moving forward. If you have questions about this or any other matter related to your case, please contact me at my office. Thank you for allowing me and my office to help you with your case. If you need any help in the future, please do not hesitate to contact me at my office. Sincerely, Andrew A. Achey. So that was the letter he sent to Kegan, and as I mentioned before, he also filed a motion. I'll go ahead and read that now. Motion to withdraw appearance. Comes now Andrew Achey, counsel of record for the defendant Kegan Kline in the above captioned cause of action, and requests that his appearance be withdrawn on behalf of the defendant. The defendant's last known address is care of the Miami County Jail at 1104 West 200 North, Peru, Indiana, 46970. Wherefore, counsel requests that the court enter an order granting withdrawal of appearance and removing him as counsel of record in the above captioned matter. Andrew Achey. So, what does this mean? Basically, it is Andrew Achey informing Kegan that he's no longer going to be his attorney and that he's filed a motion to that effect with the court. What's not entirely clear is why. Often when attorneys file a motion like this, they will explain why it is they're leaving the case. So we can speculate. One possibility is that Kegan fired him. I'm just putting that out there as a possibility. I don't even know if it's a likely possibility, but it is a possibility.
Fair to say.
The other possibility is that Andrew Achey was the one who decided to sever this relationship with Kegan Kline.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, again, there are different possibilities. There may be some possibilities that don't have anything to do with the case at all. Maybe there's something going on in Mr. Achey's own life that makes it difficult for him to find the time that the case demands. That doesn't necessarily seem likely, but that's a sort of possibility that probably should be considered.
Yeah. When we don't have facts, I think it's fair to raise different possibilities and consider them.
And there's another possibility. And again, I want to stress in the strongest possible terms that this is speculation. But attorneys are not supposed to make arguments or advance claims that they know to be untrue. And if you're in a situation where your client is making arguments and claims that you know are based on facts that aren't true, then you have an obligation not to make those claims to the court. This is one, you often hear cliches about defense attorneys don't want to ask their clients too many questions, because if they find out that their clients are lying about something, then that means the defense attorney is therefore limited in what he can say to the court.
I know. I was going to ask you about that because I feel like a lot of people might have questions like, okay, but we've all seen some high-profile cases where the person was obviously guilty and had some bizarre, ridiculous response and explanation. Were those attorneys wrong to defend those people? But you're noting that there's a key dance to do here potentially where you don't put yourself in a position to know for sure that your client is lying.
Yeah, you can suspect your client is not telling the truth, but as long as you don't know for a fact that he is lying or telling you to go and make an argument based on what you know to be a lie, then you're not breaching any ethical obligation. But if your client says, I want you to go out there and make this claim based on this particular fact, and you know that particular fact is incorrect, then you would be violating your duty to the court.
So you can't lie to the court when you're an attorney?
Yes. I don't know if that's what's going on here. Let me start by stating the obvious. Andrew Achey has an excellent reputation in Indiana. He's known as being good at his job.
Yes. That's something we've heard from people who live in this area, who understand the criminal defense landscape out there.
We can also note that at the hearing last Thursday, he did not seem to be especially vigorous in his arguments. Is that fair to say?
In his demeanor, I think that's fair to say. There was a reservedness. There was he seemed kind of quiet. The prosecution was kind of getting, their points out there in a very passionate way, kind of angrily reacting. And the defense was a bit more subdued than we've seen them. I think previously we've seen them on both more of an even keel. So I think you and I personally felt that we read Aki's body language, demeanor as not super comfortable. I mean, but of course, we're not, body language stuff means nothing. I'm just pointing that out to kind of give you our impressions. That could be for any number of reasons that have nothing to do with this case. So take it with a grain of salt, but also that was just kind of what I was reading into it, I guess.
And we can also make the obvious point that what happened last week didn't seem to be something that was a long time coming. It did not seem as if Andrew Achey was aware of Kegan's claims for a while. And again, we're going to talk about this in more depth, but Kegan Kline was basically saying the prosecution has not given me the discovery. I'm entitled to this discovery. I'm not getting it. And because I didn't get it, I might want to withdraw my plea. Those arguments were not something that Andrew Achey indicated he had been aware of. And in fact, I think it's worth noting in particular that Fox 59 reporter Russ McQuaid reported that he had a brief exchange with Andrew Achey after the hearing in which Andrew Achey confirmed to reporter McQuaid that he had not been previously aware of these claims that Kegan was making.
Yeah, that exchange took place on the staircase as we all left the courtroom. So we were right in front of him when that happened.
Yes.
So when he said that, so that doesn't really speak to a situation that's comfortable for anyone, where suddenly your client is making a decision at the 11th hour and sort of throwing a hearing into disarray when one thing was planned. And I also imagine that for an experienced defense attorney, having a client suddenly decide to plead guilty without any plea deal existing and without even giving a jury a chance to maybe go a different way must be kind of an unusual situation as well. So there's been a lot of weird twists in this, and we experience that as reporters. The public experiences that, but also the people at the heart of this case experience that.
And so, just the facts as we know them, Andrew Achey has to argue a claim in court that he's not very familiar with, doesn't seem to really relish making that argument. He tells reporter Russ McQuaid, I didn't even know about these claims until incredibly recently. And then the next day he files a letter with the court saying, I'm off this case.
And I'm going to say this, what we've previously seen in this case, as I mentioned, the guilty plea, the possible retraction of the guilty plea, that is all looking increasingly part of an erratic pattern with Kegan Kline. So when a client is potentially acting impulsively, erratically, then that's also something that I could imagine that a firing or dissolution of that relationship, could be more on the table than if something's going sort of according to a plan that everyone's agreeing to. I'm just throwing that out there because I just note that if there was a firing, I don't necessarily know that was a just one, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I want to stress, we don't know whose decision it was for Andrew Achey to leave this case. We don't know if it was Kegan's decision. We don't know if it was Mr. Achey's decision. We don't know what motivated it. We've tried to offer some reasonable speculation.
Mm-hmm. I guess I just, we try to offer reasonable speculation and discuss just sort of the higher level view of this case. But I just really feel like things have twisted and turned so much that this action and this move sort of comes to make more sense when you see it in that larger context of another random thing and a series of random things. Excellent.
And I think we both felt that this whole hearings really put defense attorney Achey in a bad position or an uncomfortable position to have to argue about these claims you don't really know about until the last minute. It's not even clear if Kegan was alleging, the prosecution didn't give me my discovery, or is he saying that my own defense attorney didn't give me the discovery?
Yeah, because they discussed it, and my understanding is the prosecution's giving it to Achey, who's then giving it to Kegan. So Kegan's allegations don't just, reflect badly on the prosecution, they reflect badly on his own attorney. And if his own attorney maybe knows with certainty that everything was given to Kegan in a timely manner, then that kind of puts him in a bad place.
If the defense attorney, Achey, is put in a position where he is expected to argue facts that he knows to be untrue, all he can do is leave the case. And I don't know if that's what happened here. I can't stress enough. I don't know if that's what happened here.
Yeah, that's not necessarily what happened. It's one of several scenarios that could be realistic. And frankly, it almost doesn't matter how it happened at this point. It just, what's important is that you have a criminal defense attorney who's worked on this case for a long time abruptly leaving right before the case enters a more critical phase for Kegan Kline. And so that's important to note.
There's a couple of very important hearings coming up, just as Attorney Achey mentioned in his letter to Kegan. So I would think, again, this is speculation, but I would think it would have to be something pretty extraordinary to make him leave the case at this time. I'd also like to note that attorney-client obligations really limit what Attorney Achey can say about this. Hypothetically, if Kegan Kline were to tell an out-and-out lie about something Andrew Achey said to him or something Andrew Achey did or did not do, Andrew Achey probably would not be able to respond to those allegations without breaking attorney-client privilege.
The murder sheet keeps us busy. At one recent court hearing, we were running around observing, gathering information, and reporting from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. Because of all that, it's hard to find time to secure quality ingredients and cook fine meals at home.
Thankfully, HelloFresh has our backs. Our terrific sponsor is America's #1 meal kit for a reason. This service combines convenience, value, and deliciousness, and ensures that you and your family are enjoying home-cooked, quality meals without the hassle.
Recently, Kevin and I got to put our heads together over something other than script writing. It was so fun to cook together. It was also quite easy. The ingredients are perfectly portioned, so there's no food waste. The instructions are also foolproof, which is lucky for us because we are fools in the kitchen.
We prepared beef bulgogi meatballs with roasted carrots, ginger rice, and sriracha sauce. It was delicious. The meatballs were flavorful and the rice was perfectly fluffy.
We're pretty used to just grabbing cheap fast food when we're on the road, so some nutritional heft and diversity of cuisine has been really nice. You never have to worry about getting tired of anything, because there's something for everyone. Go to HelloFresh.com/MSheet16 and use code MSheet16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping. Again, go to HelloFresh.com/MSheet16 and use code MSheet16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping.
Well, now that we've talked about the defense side of things, let's move on and talk about the prosecution side.
When we put our initial coverage of the sentencing hearing that wasn't out there, we had not yet gotten a press release from the prosecutor's office in Miami County. So we've since gotten that, and we wanted to sort of read that onto the show so you all can hear what they have to say about all of this as well.
Press release. Miami County Prosecutor's Office responds to continuance of State of Indiana versus Kegan Kline sentencing hearing. The Miami County Prosecutor's Office wishes to address the recent decision by the court to continue the highly anticipated sentencing hearing in the matter of State of Indiana v. Kegan Kline. We understand the significant public interest surrounding this matter and would like to provide a statement regarding our position and commitment to ensuring justice. First and foremost, we want to emphasize that the Miami County Prosecutor's Office vehemently objected to the continuance of the sentencing hearing. However, we respect the decision made by the court and acknowledge its authority in matters of legal proceedings. Throughout the course of this case, the Miami County Prosecutor's Office has diligently adhered to the principles of due process and provided the defense with timely and comprehensive discovery. We recognize the fundamental importance of transparency and fairness in the legal system, and our commitment to these values remains unwavering. While the continuance of the sentencing hearing may delay the resolution of this case, it does not diminish our dedication to prosecuting this matter. The Miami County Prosecutor's Office will continue to work tirelessly and diligently, whether this case proceeds to a sentencing hearing or trial. Our primary focus is to ensure that the truth is revealed, the rights of all parties are protected, and justice is served.
So we received that on Thursday, May 18th. We had already published our episode at that time, but I really felt it was important to read that into our program, essentially, because I think it really underscores the vehemence with which Miami County is pushing back against what Kegan is essentially alleging, which is that they didn't provide him with the necessary documentation. We're not seeing them kind of just roll over on that or say something in court and then never talk about it. They're actually addressing this with the press and saying no.
I think that's very significant. And also I think it's important to stress that this is a serious matter.
Yes.
If the prosecution is not doing its due diligence in terms of providing discovery materials to the defense, they are basically not playing fair.
Yes.
And I think it is very important for the people of Miami County, the people of Indiana, people who care about justice, to know that the prosecutor in Miami County is playing fair. And I think it's really interesting that they not only pushed back against Kegan's claim, but they did so in very strong language with no wiggle room whatsoever.
Yeah, as we both know, lawyers are sometimes very good at crafting statements that are technically true, but leave some space for reading in between the lines or kind of getting around some things, and that's definitely not the case here.
No, it's definitely not the case here. And the strong language kind of echoes the vehemence with which prosecutor Courtney Allwine spoke in court.
Yes.
She seemed angry and offended by the suggestion that the prosecutor's office did not behave appropriately.
Well, because I hope no one gets sick of my stupid, dumb metaphors, but they help me understand things, so hopefully they can help you understand things. Not being a lawyer, I'm a journalist, not coming from a legal background, sometimes it helps me to, think about things that way. But I almost feel like it's the difference between, if you and I are playing Candyland, right? And, you move, you get some move benefits you and you get ahead. I'm going to be not happy about it, but I understand that that's how you play the game. Some things are going to not benefit me. Maybe I get a card that says go back a few spaces. Well, that's the way the game goes. But if you start saying, well, Anya, you cheated, you'd stack the cards in a way that benefited yourself, then I'm going to get offended because how dare you? I'm an honest person. I would never cheat at Candyland. And, so it goes to something a little bit more than just, they don't want something that benefits Kegan's case or benefits Kegan Kline. It's really more of an initial attack on them that they're trying to defend themselves from in order to, maintain the public trust that they have with the civilians of Miami County. Because if you start getting into prosecutorial misconduct, then that undermines faith in the system. And that's a problem for everybody. So I think that you're seeing that being taken very seriously here.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because what you're seeing in the Miami County Prosecutor's Office, which of course is headed by Jeff Sinkovich, what you're seeing there is a recognition that when serious charges are made against an agency of the government, those charges need to be answered and, if possible, pushed back against, or you risk losing the faith of the public you serve.
Yes.
And that seems to be, frankly, the standard operating procedure in Miami County. Because let's do a bit of a flashback. It was in December of 2021 that we first heard about Kegan Kline. And at that time, he was first initially linked to the Delphi investigation through reporting done by
Demi Johnson of Wish TV.
Exactly. And at that time, when people first started looking into the case, that's when people first started to notice something that seemed odd. Namely, that it looked like the investigators got evidence against Kegan Kline in 2017, but did not actually arrest him until 2020. That made a lot of people wonder why. What happened? And if you think back to when we first all heard about this, there was at the time a lot of speculation that the reason for this delay was somehow the fault of the Miami County Prosecutor's Office. What happened then, and you might remember this, was in December of 2021, the Indiana State Police issued a statement that read in part, and I'm quoting here, "Once the Indiana State Police presented the criminal case to the Miami County Prosecutor in June of 2020, immediate action was taken by both the Indiana State Police and the Miami County Prosecutor's Office, which ultimately resulted in Kline's arrest." End quote. And I don't have any behind-the-scenes information here, but I can tell you statements like that don't happen by accident.
It's amusing to me because I do feel like that statement got lost in the shuffle. And with the Delphi community, the people who care about the Delphi case being so hanging on every word at every press conference, it's kind of always amusing when something like that, where you really should be reading between the lines, gets lost in the shuffle, because that's a very interesting statement on several levels.
And I think basically, this is speculation.
Yeah.
This is speculation. But basically, I believe that Miami County Prosecutor Jeff Sinkovich and his office wanted themselves cleared.
Yeah, they wanted something on the record where they're saying, we didn't slow walk this.
They wanted it on the record that as soon as we got this, we took action immediately.
Yeah.
And in fact, according to this statement, they got information about it in June. Kegan was arrested a couple of months later.
Right.
So again, I think that speaks to the tendency in Miami County for transparency and openness and accountability.
Yeah, I think, and that's certainly helpful in this case, I think, because I think it kind of answers questions before they sort of take root and start to erode public trust.
Yes, and once a prosecutor or a governmental agency loses the trust of the people, it's very hard to get back. So I think it's worth applauding the Miami County Prosecutor's Office for their willingness to strongly defend themselves against these charges, to respond to these charges, to try to clear things up.
I'll say this, as Indiana citizens and as journalists, we both certainly appreciate this on its, for being a principled stance. But I also just, from a cold-eyed perspective of strategy, I think it helps because it kind of keeps things moving and keeps distractions minimal, right? It kind of keeps some of the more loud voices in terms of speculation from being super relevant. Whereas in a situation, if there is more, what the heck is going on, then those voices can kind of, crowd out everybody else. And I think it's just something to think about.
So again, the statement, I applaud them being so clear and with no wiggle room whatsoever. We did not deny him discovery.
And yes, and we just would say that it's never too late to switch tactics for prosecutors to adopt a more open approach, and it's actually pretty strategic, in addition to being the right thing to do.
I think, frankly, it served Jeff Sinkovich's office pretty well. I in my recollection, after the Kegan Kline connection was announced, there was criticism of the prosecutor's office for slow walking it. I don't think I've seen the prosecutor's office specifically blamed for it after the statement came out. So being open, being transparent, I think it helps. And
I don't see how it hurts the case because, it's not giving away key information about witnesses or specific pieces of evidence. It's really more of a process thing, taking the public through, what is going on in this important case. And, that's something the public, I believe, is owed.
Anyway, I think this also kind of naturally leads into another subject people have been talking about. There's been a lot of speculation that the real reason there was a continuance was because there's some sort of secret negotiation going on that's somehow related to Delphi.
And I get that, because on the one hand, as human beings, we have a tendency to seek patterns and want to connect things that, we would find interesting or helpful. And on the other hand, you have people who just kind of just make stuff up on the internet. Let's just be honest. Let's be blunt about that. People will just make stuff up or state things as fact that they don't know for sure, or just kind of, it's just the shambles that we're used to at this point. It's nothing new. It's always unfortunate, but I think most people know when they see stuff like that and are able to maybe kind of push past it. I think a lot of the voices that I'm kind of referring to are never going to be, particularly influential because of that, because I think people are sick of it. But it always happens. It always kind of kicks up some noise whenever there's a delay or everything becomes, oh my gosh, deal making. This is all connected. It's all coming, it's all kicking off. And, everybody, we all know at this point, we gotta pump our brakes when stuff like this happens, because most of the time there's some very, very boring explanation or, a kind of an obvious explanation that has nothing to do with, the kind of more exciting explanation that's being proffered. I just want to state in this case, this delay is not happening because Kegan's trying to go make some deals. I would argue that at this point, I imagine pretty much deals would be nearly off the table for somebody who, maybe could be argued to have a lot of credibility in the deal-making space.
And in fact, for whatever reason, prosecutor Courtney Allwine has explicitly said there's not going to be a deal made in this case.
No. And so, she's not going to get out in court and lie. She has no reason to do that, first of all. And that would be unethical and shooting herself in the foot in a way that wouldn't make any sense. It's not part of some strategy. It's just, there's no deals. There's obviously no political will for that in this county. And I'm sure there's an element of it if a deal requires good information to be transferred, can we trust that the information we're being given is good? We also know things like, to connect it back to Delphi also, we know that in the summer of 2022, ISP Superintendent Doug Carter flew up to Miami County. There were discussions about no deals. So that's been a consistent drumbeat. That's not, I don't believe that is posturing. I can understand where people think maybe is that just kind of like, we put that out and kind of, that gets him to behave in a certain way. I actually think that is sincere. I don't think people want a deal for him. I think the powers that be here, are adverse to making a deal with him.
And again, I'm repeating myself a little bit, but we were there. We saw prosecutors Jennifer Kiefer and Courtney Allwine. They, especially Courtney Allwine, seemed genuinely angry, if not offended, by the allegations Kegan Kline was making against the prosecutor's office. That wasn't play acting.
No.
They weren't pretending to be upset or offended. They weren't playing 5D dimensional chess where for some strategical reasons we don't understand, they thought it would make sense for Kegan Kline to make damning allegations against the office that they both serve so well.
I think the rumors and the kind of speculation around this is totally sincere, and I get it, because people want to think that if Richard Allen did not act alone, that everybody who was involved in the underlying felonies, the hypothetical underlying felonies that led to Libby and Abby's death, they want everybody to be punished. And they want, the idea you have is, okay, well, if the only way to get Kegan Kline to spill what he knows, if he knows anything, is to make a deal, then you have to make a deal. I get that. But I really don't think a deal is going to be made here.
And again, Courtney Allwine took this case over, I believe, in January. I may not have that date exact right. And she said at that time, no deal. Before she took over, for different reasons, there did appear to be a deal on the table. And when there was a deal on the table, we didn't have attorneys come in and read play drama scripts.
No.
Basically, when a deal was on the table, the attorneys would say, we want to delay this hearing because there's negotiations in progress.
At that time, I believe Peter Dietrichs was in charge of the case, and, he and Achey would come in, and there were a couple of, very short hearings where there'd almost be okay, we're still in negotiations, we're still talking, we need some more time to talk this out. So when there was stuff going on behind the scene, they were pretty open about that. They weren't open about the contents of those discussions, but they were open about the fact that discussions were going on. So it seems like, again, we've established that Miami County has been pretty transparent about this. And so is Achey, right? Achey would come out and say the same thing. So I think we can trust that when there's been a shift in the rhetoric, that indicates there's been a shift in the procedure and the process here. And it really seems like a deal is a thing of the past, a fading memory in this case, and not something that is going to be continuously worked on.
While we're still kind of on this subject, I want to mention another reason to understand that this was a surprise for everybody is that there were witnesses there. You will remember that Prosecutor Kiefer wrote a pretty detailed brief about sentencing. And at one point in the brief, she said something to the effect of, we have evidence that we are prepared to present at the sentencing hearing involving some of the possession of CSAM issues. So we saw a number of investigators there, and our understanding is they were well prepared to get into some graphic details.
Yeah, we noticed in particular ISP Detective Dave Vito sitting up, I believe it's called the Well of the Court, which is in front of the railing that separates the public seating from where the court officers are. He was sitting with another man who I did not recognize. I have a guess on who that is, but I don't know that for sure, so I'm not going to say it. They were conferring with Kiefer and Allwine a lot. Our understanding is, just from talking to different people was that there was going to be some sort of opportunity for the state to, as Ms. Kiefer stated, basically kind of present more evidence, kind of say, here's what he did. Maybe that's a bit unusual in some settings, but I think it was just an effort to kind of really underscore the seriousness of these crimes.
And also, I think in our episode on the sentencing brief that she filed, the whole issue of possession is a complicated one.
Yes.
And if you're charged with possessing 10 books, you're going to need to prove that those are 10 separate events. In other words, I just don't own all 10 books at one time. I bought each of these 10 books separately, and when I bought these books separately at different times, I was committing a different crime.
Right.
So that was something that they were going to go into.
Yeah. So it was kind of, I think, a measure of maybe some of the specificity of this case being a bit unusual and kind of having some issues that they really needed to talk through. And so, yeah, that was our understanding for the presence of some of those investigators. But obviously, they didn't get a chance to speak and may end up having to testify in trial instead if things keep going this way.
I think it's worth, at this point, clearing up something. I think we both agree, we feel very strongly that what happened in court the other day was not in any way connected to Delphi.
Yes.
Does that mean that Kegan Kline is definitely not connected to Delphi?
No. Yeah, I feel like we're always in a weird position with this because, we're always telling the people who think everything Kegan Kline related is Delphi related. No. This is court procedure. But then we're also very open-minded to the possibility that a connection exists. I would say that we see the Kegan Kline case as existing on some sort of spectrum regarding the Delphi case. And I think on the far end of the spectrum, you have, this is a completely unrelated event to the murder. Kegan Kline and his online activities played no role in the horrible fate that befell Abby and Libby. Just a, completely random situation where you had an online predator in some form of contact with Liberty German ahead of time. And it was just, just didn't end up playing a role. And the only real connection that exists is that the vigorous investigation into the deaths of the girls led to the discovery of related crimes, including Kegan, including, what he's alleged to have done online. So that's a scenario that I think absolutely could be the case here. Very much a possibility. I think a lot of people say, what are the chances? Like, what's the And I very much agree with that on some level. But I also have to say, I think we've talked to some detectives who are like, coincidences don't exist. We've talked to other detectives who are like, coincidences do happen. Some weird stuff can happen. That kind of, one thing I always go back to is the Burger Chef case that we started out on. I mean, there's like a bunch of people in that where you're kind of like, oh, they sound pretty good. And what are the odds that all these people could have come up in the same case? And, it happens. So another thing that kind of is in that side of the spectrum's favor is that Kegan Kline has never been charged. He's never been charged with Delphi. We've all heard, possible bits of evidence that would have been against him or statements he's made to police or in this form or that form. And, you can argue that there's a lot of interesting things there, but it's never risen to the point where Carroll County felt we need to charge this guy. We need to roll the dice on a circumstantial case. Most cases are circumstantial, obviously, but, they never felt that it rose to that level. They did feel that Richard Allen rose to that level, and that deserves to be stated. I don't see why. I can't really fathom a scenario why if there was enough evidence to charge Kegan in anything, or charge anyone related to Kegan, charge anyone who might have had associations with Anthony Schatz. I don't. If there was evidence, I imagine they would charge him. I don't think that's where people kind of get into the trying to do the 5D chess situation where like, oh, maybe they're delaying that because of reasons. I don't see that. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't see why they would delay that. I think if you have it, if you smoke, if you got them, smoke them, like if you got, just go for it basically at a certain point. There's no reason to delay. So I think all of that is one end of the spectrum that I think is solid. A lot of people are there and I can see that. I'll describe the other end of the spectrum and then maybe we can talk about where we kind of lie. Other end of the spectrum is there is a link. He's an online predator who is seemingly, police stated, in contact with one of the girls before their deaths. And given the strange statements from law enforcement and Carroll County prosecutor Nick McClellan, noting that they, seemingly are actively looking for other possible actors in the case, that strongly points to social media playing a role in that there could be other perpetrators. There could be other perpetrators at the scene. It's not impossible. I don't necessarily know if that's likely. There could be perpetrators in the sense that there's underlying felonies going on that lead to the murders, and maybe only one person is directly involved in the killings itself, but there's people who could feasibly be on the hook for felony murder or something like that. And then there's also maybe some middle ground there, I would say, where you have, people doing crimes. Maybe it doesn't rise to the level of felony murder, but maybe there's some moral blame to go around. That's a possibility too. So those are the two ends of the spectrum. And where do we lie on that? Well, I mean, we kind of are, I think, probably boringly in the middle, where we're not necessarily super convinced either way. We're kind of open-minded and sort of willing to be persuaded by the evidence, I think. I mean, I think the thing that we remain on Kegan Kline's case vis-a-vis Delphi is that we're curious. We'd love to know sort of if there are things about this case where we can kind of write it off regarding Delphi. Kind of say, oh, well, that was a red herring. They went down that path. They investigated it. I mean, we know they investigated that angle, the Kline angle, intensively. And so, like, a lot of work went in there in our reporting on that. We certainly stand by because, yeah, I mean, that was definitely a major chapter of the case, so to speak. Whether it becomes relevant in the end, that's up for grabs. But the actual facts of the investigation are not. That was an avenue they pursued vigorously. But then we're also open to maybe there being some link ultimately. I mean, I think it's hard to let go of an online predator being in contact with a child victim who ends up dead, and you have strange things like Bridge Guy being described as walking purposefully towards the bridge. You have things like Kegan Kline looking up strange search terms in Vegas, which is alleged by police investigators in the 2020 transcript of the interviews he did back then. You kind of want to at least close those out. And so we're kind of in a position where we're curious, we're flexible, we want more information, but we're not, I think it's kind of dumb at this point to be married to any one theory, because there's so much we don't know about the case against Richard Allen and how that will play out and what McClelland will put together as a narrative of how that crime unfolded. I think on the one hand, alternate suspects like Ron Logan, like Kegan Kline, those complicate the case against Allen because they offer, hey, maybe this guy did it. But at the same time, if police had only focused on Richard Allen for 6 years, then the defense would turn around and say, you got blinders on, and they'd pull out some suspects of their own. So I think I don't really know how much it's going to hurt or help the case against Allen. We're just curious, I guess. That's where we are.
When it comes to alternate suspects in a case, I often think back to a conversation we had with a friend of ours who was an investigator with law enforcement. Don't have permission to use his name, so I won't use his name. But we were talking about a particular case and a particular person who was investigated as a suspect in that case. And I asked this investigator, did you clear this person? And he looked at me as if I was an idiot, which he often looks at me in that fashion. And he said, Kevin, the only way you clear a person is by convicting someone else.
You got to leave your options open, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're not really willing to walk away from many angles in the Delphi case. I remain curious about aspects of the case against Logan. I think we're curious about other people that maybe received less focus in the media, maybe that we're not aware of. You want to be open-minded, and I don't see the value. I think people who are trying to establish, a sheen of credibility try to project certitude and, I know all the answers and my source tells me this and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, that's, in a case where we don't have any answers, in a case where so much remains unknown, what's the point of that? Why not just remain curious? We try to approach these cases like students. We're trying to learn, talk to experts, is this interesting? Is this interesting? Is that interesting? And move forward from there. But standing up on a soapbox and telling you all, it's definitely still connected, or no, it's not. Let's all forget about it. What do we know? I mean, let's roll with it. Keep asking questions and see where we get.
I think those are great points. Before we wrap up, I want to say that I always feel a little bit guilty when we go to Peru and then spend all of our time talking about child sexual abuse materials and charges like that.
Yeah, I know.
I often think back to, I once attended a lecture given by the writer Kurt Vonnegut. He said, sometimes people act like I'm a hick because I'm from Indiana, but the most sophisticated man who ever lived was Cole Porter, and he's from Indiana, so that says something. And I want to say that not only is Cole Porter from Indiana, he's from Peru, Indiana. Mm-hmm. So that says something. This is a really great town full of wonderful people.
I love the people. We always have so many nice interactions when we go there. It was like we were walking into the courthouse to go to the sentencing hearing. We ran into a lady who was complimenting the podcast and kind of discussing it. She was super nice. It's like you just kind of run into people like that who, are very like civically engaged and willing to chat and just kind of share their thoughts or, just kind of say hi. And I just find people there very friendly. Always love, shout out to the Peru Library. They're amazing. And, it's in true crime, you cover towns in a way and you cover communities in a way through such a tragic and upsetting lens. And I think we always in particular want to shout out like that's not all there is to these areas. That's not all there is to Delphi. That's not all there is to Carroll County. That's not all there is to Peru or Miami County. It's filled with a lot of very bright, curious people who have a community beyond these tragic cases, and they care about these cases because they care about their communities. But we don't want to act as if these are bad places just because horrible things have happened there. They're more than that, and we've come to care about some of these communities very much, and feel like in a way, like, even though we're outsiders, feel a bit of a part of it because we go up there so much and have reported on these cases. So we always like to say something nice because
it's a great place.
We feel bad.
I want to mention, I mentioned Cole Porter. They have a Cole Porter Festival in Peru. That's going to be in June. And also, besides Cole Porter, they're also known for their connection to the circus. And they have a great Circus City Festival coming up in July.
Heck yeah.
And if you're anywhere near the area, strongly encourage you to visit. This is a great town.
Yeah, it's a great town. It's always nice to visit, even though the circumstances are upsetting and disturbing. But anyways, hopefully this kind of clarifies some things about what's next for Kegan Kline's case, how we feel about its connection to Delphi and sort of the possibilities that exist there, and just all the other things happening here. We hope to, maybe have some more to report on the Kegan Kline angle in particular as things progress through June and July. So we'll keep you updated with interesting filings, with our thoughts. Hopefully can get some experts to maybe discuss what we could expect. And in addition to that, we'll be looking also into the Richard Allen side of things. That's coming up in mid-June. He's got a bond hearing scheduled. We'll see what happens with that, and could be very interesting, or it could turn out to be like another Kegan Kline thing because, you never know what's going to happen, what's going to get moved around, what's going to get shifted, what's going to, turn out to be actually just like a 5-minute meeting. But I think that one will be important if it, if it goes off.
Regardless of what happens, we'll attend and tell you all about it. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much for listening to The Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for The Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening. Hello, Murder Sheet listeners. Thank you so much for sticking with us until the very end. Just wanted to take a moment as we close out to thank our sponsor, HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. They are #1 for a reason, folks. Kevin and I have been loving the meals we're getting from HelloFresh. We're talking farm fresh produce, protein, all sorts of customizable options to get you exactly what you and your family need. It's very delicious, it's very nutritious, and it's quite affordable. So it ticks off all our boxes. We've been very happy with the service. And, would love for you guys to try it out if you're curious, or if you've tried it out in the past and enjoyed it, get that discount. It's hellofresh.com/msheet16. And then you're going to plug in the code msheet16. You get 16 free meals plus free shipping. You can't beat that. we've really been delighted by it. We work very hard on the podcast. It takes up a lot of time. It's our small business. We really enjoy the work. We enjoy conversing with all of you every week. But at the same time, it's nice for Kevin and I to kind of have something to do outside of office hours, and cooking these meals has been really fun. We're terrible in the kitchen, like disastrous. I mean, like I can tell you horror stories. You know, I probably shouldn't get into it on the podcast, but I mean, some pretty disastrous moments involving our cooking. You know, nothing life threatening, but definitely stuff that we tried to be overly ambitious about. And it either went horribly wrong, or it ended up costing like way more than it should have because we didn't properly like think about ingredients. And we're not gifted in the realm of the kitchen, but HelloFresh makes us pretend like we are, because everything is so pre-portioned and pre-planned, and the instructions are super clear. So like, you're not going to mess it up if you're like us. And if you're good in the kitchen, then it's just less of a hassle, and you get everything that you need. You don't have to run out to the grocery store. So super nice. Try it out. I've really enjoyed the meals that they've sent us so far. I can say that Kevin has too. I highlight that because Kevin is pretty picky when it comes to food. He does not like everything. He has pretty strong specifications and preferences. Very much cares about things like fresh produce and farm produce and things like that. So he's very picky. And I think the fact that he is really enjoying HelloFresh is a testament to the quality here, because he's a stickler for that kind of thing. And so if you are, I think you will enjoy it as well. And again, the URL and promo code that'll get you a sweet discount is hellofresh.com/msheet16. That's MSHEET 16. And use code MSHEET16. You're going to get 16 free meals plus free shipping. We hope you enjoy it. And again, thank you so much for listening.